Okay, welcome back, everybody, or any of you that actually listened to the first one. This is episode 2 in a series of coronavirus podcasts, where myself, Robin Letts, will be looking back at some of the more memorable national knockout games the club has had in the past 10, 15 years or so. Last week we had Adam Kelly talking about that famous game at Sully, and hopefully you guys got plenty of enjoyment out of that. It's nice to go down memory lane. Tonight I've got someone who, for anyone who's been around the club for the last 15, 20 years, this name will come up in a lot of national knockout games, a lot of different discussions. He's kind of been Mr. National Cup for plenty of games I've played in anyway. It's James Brown. Brownie, how you doing?
Yeah, very good. Good to be here.
How is what you mean at home?
Yeah, speaking to someone other than my kids.
How's the lockdown treating you?
Yeah, very good. It's very good. I'm just messing about in my back garden trying to come up with challenges for the school kids. So
you're not recording a load of cheesy videos of you and stuff, posting them.
Absolutely, yeah.
So far, I've managed to refrain, but I've watched Lloyd do some keepy uppies with a football and various other bits and bobs knocking about. What have you got then for us? Can you give us any spoilers?
I'll give you the link. There's too many to tell you about now.
All right, good. Well, maybe we'll put that underneath the podcast in the description. Get you a few hits.
Very good.
So, Brownie, obviously we've got plenty of games that we could talk about. I think for the purpose of this podcast, we could concentrate on 2, which we'll get to in a minute. But just tell us a little bit about how you started playing for Bath Cricket Club back when you did.
So I was always Newport born and bred. My dad was captain at Newport. Then I was captain at Newport when I was about 23, and then we moved to Bath in 2000.
That's you.
Me and Lucy moved to Bath in 2000. But obviously at that stage I was too scared to try and play for Bath because they were too good. So I went back to Bath for the first year, to Newport for the first year I lived in Bath. But then that just became too difficult. So I joined in 2002. And probably for the first 2 years I was in and out of it. I probably played more first than seconds, but I played a bit of both. And I think the first year we're going to talk about was 2003, and I've had a look back through that year, and again I was in and out of the first team a little bit, but yeah, joined in 2002 and probably played on and off the next 15 years in the first team, and still play the odd game now.
And your role very much as an all-rounder when you started, or did you lean either way?
Well, strangely, I'd always been a bowler that batted a bit at Newport. And probably for that first season or two, I barely bowled. So I somehow found a niche for myself as a specialist number 7 or 8. Fielded a bit, and yeah, I'm looking at the overs I bowled in those 2 years, and it's very, very few. But yeah, I always describe myself as a bits and pieces cricketer, and I suppose that's probably what I always have been.
Probably must have changed at some point though, because obviously you and I have played a lot of cricket together, but when I think about the biggest impacts that you've had on games, with the exception of the two games we're going to probably talk about more than any other, it's been with the ball. That kind of hitting a length hard, but with the keeper up, which we all know in league cricket's quite tough.
Yeah, probably. But I say those first 2 or 3 years, I don't know what it was. I don't know whether I just sort of lost my bowling for a bit, or people didn't notice it. But yeah, in those first 2 years, it was more a case of, I'd always done a job being a bowler and batting 7 or 8. It actually seemed probably in those couple of years that I had to do quite a lot of batting at 7 and 8. We had a few collapses, so I became a bit of a specialist at trying to sort of, I don't know, save an innings or things like that. Yeah, that's how I managed it. But after that, probably, again, I was looking probably 2005 onwards. I bowled my overs regularly, and I guess became that all rounder, I suppose.
I think that role that you spoke about there, that's number 7 coming in saving a game. I think if you're going to play in a team that's successful in club cricket, you have to have one of those guys, because, you know, I could just think of so many times where I've played games of cricket where you're chasing 170, 180, you know, against whoever it is, doesn't matter. And then a couple of wickets go, and all of a sudden there's just the mentality flicks straight away. And it's an art, it's a skill to be able to, you know, handle that pressure, but also realize that you're still just doing all the same things that you would normally do. So you think batting in that position a lot sort of gave you the skills to be able to do that better than most?
Yeah, I think so. And you're right, but where we were lucky is we had a few of us. So Statey in those days batted 7 or 8 in the same sort of place as me. Lloyd came in, and that's where he started. So we had a lot of
towards the end of the decade.
Yeah. So well, Statey, I came into the first team with Statey, so we probably batted 7 and 8 for 10 years almost together. So we had enough players in that area, and that's what we always used to say. Every team had 4 really good batters, like we did. Every team had a couple of really good bowlers, but we would have batters down to 10, and we would have 6 or 7 bowlers. And I guess when we did get ourselves into trouble, we could normally get out of it with a bowling change or somebody down the order getting some runs.
Yeah. And Greg Brown was captain when you first came in?
Yeah, Greg was the first 2 years, 2002, 2003. I'm trying to remember. Was it Staunce after him?
Yeah, I think so, because 04 was my sort of first full year, and Staunce was definitely had taken over by then. But what was Greg like to play under as a captain?
Yeah, he was really good because he was calm. He was pretty cool. Made good decisions, I thought, because I thought he didn't get too emotional about the game most of the time. So I thought he managed to have a pretty clear head, and he was very sort of self-effacing in that. You know, in those days he would bat 6, whereas he probably could have batted higher. He wouldn't bowl himself, probably because he didn't like bowling. But you know, he tended to stand at slip. He'd finish some games from number six, best slip catcher probably I've ever played with, bar maybe one, who would have been up there. But and he did the job really well. Everyone liked him. Everyone played for him. So it was a really good time.
So we get to summer of 2003, and what turned out to be a pretty magical summer for the club, really. I remember it clear as a bell because it was the first year that I came over to the club myself. And I think I probably started right in the middle of the cup run. And there was obviously a bit of a buzz about the place. In the next episode of this podcast, we've got Statey, Staunce and Greg Brown all on together to talk about that cup run as a whole. But in the middle of it was one of the kind of more dramatic games in a series of games down at Bridgie. What do you remember about kind of the lead up to that game, and Bridgie as a club at that time?
Well, again, we thought we had a good side, I think, because we played a good Swansea side early on, and we got past them. And then I think we played Yeovil.
Who were Westlands back then?
Yeah, Westlands Yeovil, which ended up being quite a tough game, and so they were all fairly tricky. I don't think we cruised any of them, but I think we just thought we had a good side. And Bridgwater, I didn't really know about because they weren't in the Western League when I was playing for Newport. So I didn't really know Bridgie as a club until I came to Bath. So I didn't know a lot about them other than they had a couple of stars. So Colsey was obviously there. I think Jason Kerr was probably knocking around that time. And actually, someone we didn't know at the time who played in that game, who was a real handful, was AK.
Yeah, we did actually, he kind of spoke about what it was like to play against Bath, in that game. He kind of gave us, a few insights as to kind of how, psychologically it was difficult to play against a team like Bath. Did you feel like you had kind of a psychological edge over teams?
Yeah, possibly, because as I say, I played against Bath quite a lot as a Newport player, and you knew they were good. And the era I played against them, they did very well, and most people struggled against them. So I think you did have. Um, but there was also with that people really wanted to knock you over.
Yeah.
And I suppose we were at times a side people loved to hate, and people for that reason wanted to beat you. So there was that challenge came with it as well.
So we end up. Do you remember what happened to the toss? I think it was a Bath won the toss. I think that's what I've got here. But,
Do you know what? I don't actually know.
Seems
But
like that would be accurate because it's kind of always a bit of a bat first, isn't it? When
I would have thought so. Yeah. So, and as I say, we didn't know much about them apart from Colsey, and I might be wrong, but I don't think anyone knew who AK was, and most people knew who some people were. But this guy came charging in. I thought he's good, and no one really knew who he was. And he actually.
I was very surprised to see his name on the team sheet because I had no idea that he was kind of around sort of Bridgie, or I thought he'd started at Taunton because we went to him maybe the following year in a league game at Taunton.
Yeah.
And he got some runs at the end to win it. So he's opening the bowling with Michael Coles, which I was surprised to see. I mean, was Colsey kind of a keeper up bowler back then, or did he have a bit more about him?
No, he ran in, and he would bowl you bumpers, and
right.
he was a very different bowler to what he became probably 5 years later. But at that time, those two were a real handful. And as I said, around that era, sometimes you went there and Jason Kerr would have been in the mix as well. So they always had a good seam attack, and that it was quite a challenge because it's always a bit green down there. So it was always quite tricky. So I guess, like you say, I win the toss and bat first, but it was it was probably always one of those ones you wouldn't mind losing the toss at Bridgie because I'm not sure you ever really knew what to do down there.
No, I mean I don't think we've had a lot of ding dongs with Bridgie over the years. I don't think I can remember many games where it's been team one bats first and gets 250 and the other team just folds.
No.
And in this game that wasn't the case because it wasn't a great start, was it?
Well, no, I'd say I did a bit of research when you told me as I'm getting a bit old, so I thought I'd better remind myself. And we were 28 for 5, 72 for 6. Swin's got his sort of standard 50. But I came in when we were 72 for 6, and we had been a lot worse. And it looked like there were 4 ducks in the top 6, so it was real sort of carnage in those first 5 or 10 overs.
Going through those names, I mean, I'm sure. Well, I'm hoping that if our listener base has grown from 1 from the first episode, we might have some younger listeners who won't necessarily have heard of the names of Willie Murray, Kim Watson, Gordon Swinney, those guys. But just tell me about their impact on that side, because I mean, I remember them being titans of the club at the time.
Yeah, well, I caught the tail end of Willie and Swins' career. And as you do often on the balcony, you pick your all-time Bath 11. Both of those two would be very close to it, if not in it. Will's just whacked it. But actually, in this year, was a really, really effective bowler as well. Bowled the little skiddy seamers. Swins was just class. He was, great fielder, top off spinner, probably the best batter we had at that time. So just a really good player, and around him you got the younger guys of Ben Staunton, Tom Hankins, Kim Watson, and then Greg Brown was at 6. So it was a really good batting order. So to see that batting order, 29 for 5, and me batting at 8, thinking I'm in and out of this side, and our superstar lineups just got ripped apart by this lot. You sort of thought we were in a bit of trouble.
You might have to correct Play Cricket here, because I was under the impression that Hanks was keeper for that season, that cut run, but it's got the gloves next to Popsy. I wonder if that's
Yeah, that's wrong a lot of the time because I've gone through this and I'm keeper in a lot of these games apparently. So I think play cricket's made a mistake there. I think it was Hanks who was keeping.
So you come in at 29 for 5. Or
No, I came in at 8. So we were 70 for 6.
76. So Potsy's just gone. So you're in with Swins. What's the game plan there? Because we're talking about this is a regional final. So it's last 32. So you're getting really towards the business end of the competition. How do you approach trying to put a score on the board, and what is a good score in your mind?
Well, I think it was a tough wicket. So you get to that stage, you sort of think, look, we get 150 and we're doing all right, or we've got a chance. And I was probably, to put it in modern terms, going in thinking, I thought Swins was class. So I was probably Jack Leach to his Ben Stokes, and I was just going to try and hang around and see how many he could get. And then that plan went all tits up, if you like, because he got out very shortly after, I think. So I was left with Stacey, Thorby, and Gwills to try and get what we could.
And for those of us who are slightly younger, although I did play with both of them briefly, Thorby and Gwills, let's just say they weren't renowned for their batting prowess.
No. Well, they got 16 between them in this game, and that was probably about their totals for a season normally. So yeah, you sort of thought when Swins got out, I thought, right, well, I know Stacey can bat, so we got a chance here, and we had a bit of a partnership. And then he went, but actually we managed to bat for long enough. It's one of those situations where you sort of think, right, all we got to do now is bat as many overs as we can, and almost see how many we get. And we managed to do that, and we got sort of to 41, 42 overs. And I guess I probably at 40 overs, maybe a bit before that, tried to put my foot down a bit more, while Forbes was still there. And then obviously we got close to the end, and we had a bit of fun actually, and we probably scored quite quickly in the last 5 overs. Gwills flat batted a 6 into the sight screen, which I'm sure if you want to ask him about, he will tell you at great length.
Well, there's two things that Gwills and I talk about these days when we do bump into each other, and one of them is his 6, and the other one is another incident that happened at Bridgwater a couple of years later, which he still blames me for.
Well,
even though it's Barnes' fault. But
let me put his 6 in context, because Colsey, as I said, was a quick bowler. Then nasty, didn't mind bowling bouncers. Gwills, just to watch him set up, you could tell he couldn't bat. So as a bowler, to be flat batted back straight over your head and hit the sight screen, it's cold. He must have been fuming. Well, actually, he started laughing, I think. But then the next ball, to add insult to injury, Gwills got down and tried to reverse lap him over third man, and nearly got killed. And then, which was one of the funnier moments I've known on a cricket field. But yeah, he managed to scrape 13, and then I got 60, and we got to 164, which we then thought was a reasonable total to defend with a decent bowling attack. Although you probably would have still said that, I don't know, maybe we were a stronger batting side that day. I don't know, actually. No, the bowling was pretty strong. So we got to 160. So you sort of thought, yeah, we've probably got a chance here.
Well, let's just go back a little bit, because, again, if there are, people out there, young cricketers, that are listening to this, you don't just go from 70 for 6 or 80 for 7 when Twins gets out, with the tail, to then doubling your team's score and giving your team a chance. There's a process, and it is a skill. And, how do you go about building or rebuilding, and then how do you know when the best time is to then try and kick on and roll the dice?
Listen, the way I always did it was to get myself scoring as quick as I could, and that generally meant singles, twos. And as I said, I was lucky enough to bat a lot of my batting with Stacey, who was super quick. In those days, I was probably quick enough between the wickets. So we would generally get it going that way. I remember a game we played against Froster, where we both got 40 odd at 7 and 8 at home, and I think barely any of us we didn't hit a boundary. So I would paddle sweep it for 2 off trainer, and then Statey would pop it over extra for 2, and we'd just do it like that. We knew our areas to score. We would get ourselves going, and then 2 things happen. I think the opposition start to panic a bit and maybe put the sweepers out when they could put more pressure on, or just bowlers try too hard to get us out, thinking, we're 29 for 5, we should be rolling these over. So I think the opposition side starts to change what they do, and you just gain some confidence. Once you get going, you start to feel in control, and once you know you can find a single or a 2 pretty much at will, I think then you pretty much start to think, right, I'm in control here. Grant Shepherd was the coach when we came here, and he used to talk about when you went into bat, it was a case of coping. You'd go in, the first thing you do is try and cope, and then you'd eventually get to control. And I think, me and Statey would try and do that by scoring as regularly as possible, even though that wouldn't be big shots necessarily.
I think, one thing that a lot of young cricketers, club cricketers making their way, I think the one thing a lot of people don't quite do well is understand their own game. And, you see a lot of different stuff on the TV, you see different, shots and, people doing all kinds of different things. But actually knowing your own strengths is probably the most important skill there is, isn't it?
Yeah, and weaknesses, because you got to remember, you say I learned how to bat this role because I was never good enough to be a top 4 or 5 batter. So from 16 playing in the first team for Newport, I'd been 6, 7 or 8 basically, and so what the I'd seen that situation, even though I was probably only, what would I have been, 27, 28 at the time. I'd probably batted at that position at first team level for 12 years. So you see those sort of situations time and again, and you start to realise how you can get through them.
Seems unlikely that I would have ever known a 28-year-old. I'll still work for that.
Let alone a 16-year-old one.
So, you get 60. Do you remember what the reception was like for when you brought your half century up?
No, not really. I never really remembered those sorts of things. I was one of those ones who just sort of stuck my bat up and tried to carry. I never really knew what to do. I was never a kiss the badge and sprint off with my hands raised like Lloyd Davis. I would sort of just sort of stick my bat up and be a bit embarrassed, I suppose. All I do really remember about it, because there are pictures, I used to have a horrendous green helmet, and a lot of the pictures from that cup run are of my horrendous green helmet. So I changed it the very next year because I didn't realise quite how bad it looked.
That blue Missouri one, wasn't it?
Yeah, still got that.
Okay, so we spoke earlier about how a lot of the the psychological battle when you're chasing a low score, a lot of that comes from the end of the first innings and then the first, say, 5 overs of the second. Did you feel like at the halfway point that you were, on top, ahead of the game? Did you have the momentum?
Yeah, definitely. Because I'm doing our attack a bit of a disservice when I sort of thought we were batting heavy. But if you think of 28 for 5 and who those 5 were that they got out, we were nowhere in the game, and they were, all the momentum was with them, and they would have expected to roll us probably under 100 at that stage. So for us to come off with 164, and we'd scored fairly quickly at the end to the point where, as I say, Gwills was carting their best bowlers everywhere. There was definitely a feeling that we've got a real chance now. You've had enough half-time team talks to know that when that happens, the first thing everyone says is momentum. We've got momentum. But then you had Mark Thorburn, Tom State to be able to run in, but you also had Gwills and Swins. And I think 2 really good spinners are always going to be important in those sorts of games, and Gwills in particular. Yeah, he got 4 for 18 off 9, and they just couldn't play him.
Yeah, Gwil's. Again, he's one of these players who, when I first started, was at very much the end of his kind of first team playing career. But playing with him, you appreciated how good he was. He had that great combination of control and spin. He could really spin the ball. And I think the only other spinner that I played with at Bath that's sort of comparable to Gwil's is Marchie. Different kind of bowlers, because Gwil's was sort of a bit more round arm to try and sort of spin off the pitch, whereas Marchie tried to kind of get that bit of drift, didn't he, and then straighten it. But really, really good bowler, and Swin's kind of complemented him well at the other end. But you're looking at the attack, and there's no Barnsley, there's no Macca, so it's definitely you're definitely a couple of seamers short. I mean, do you remember where they were or why they weren't playing?
No, I don't actually, because Macca played a lot in that cup run. I think Barnsley only did come in later. So I'm not really sure where Macca was, because he would normally have been in that side. But as I say, you still look at it and you think, well, Thorby and Statey are two proper opening bowlers. Willie was arguably one of our best bowlers in that cup run, and was just really hard to get away, often bowled in the first 15. And then those two spinners, and we probably had some other guys who could have chucked me, Greg Brown, could have bowled a few overs in that side as well. So I think, Staunch didn't bowl. So I still think we were going onto the pitch thinking we've got enough to win this. And you say about Gwil's and about his skills, one of the best things was, because of the character he was, he didn't care. So he was so calm. So pressure didn't seem to get to him. So he just bowled, and he was very phlegmatic about everything. And that's a massive trait for a spinner.
You remember that catch he took at home in the league at mid-on?
Yeah, of course I do. Because if I ever talk to him, I only talk to him about 3 things, and that catch is the third thing.
Which again, like if you don't know Gwil's and you are listening to this, he wasn't an athlete, and mid-on to third was very much where he lived. So in reply, it's sort of they start a little bit better than we did, I guess. Get to 30 odd for 1, but from there, it seems like we were always in control of the game. Was there ever a moment really where you thought you might have swung back the other way?
I didn't know him very well, because he hadn't played on my circuit where I was at Newport. But I think everyone sort of thought, if you get past Colsey, then we got a really good chance, because as he's proved in the sort of 15 years since, he can win a game on his own, and often has done against us. So I think when we got past him, you probably thought, right, we're favourites here. No.
Happened. I'd say probably around 39 for 4. That probably would have been Colsey, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I would have thought so. Statey bowled him, and after that, their side actually, this team doesn't look actually that strong on paper compared to some of the sides we played against. So no, their batting didn't look great. So if we got past Colsey, I thought we were in.
I think it goes to show, though, that if we say that they probably were a bowling side on the day, and guys were a bowling side on the day, actually the 2 innings they mirror themselves up to a point, and the point in which the game changes is the point that you come in, and again, we spoke earlier about how it's a skill to be able to do that over time, but the difference I think that you made on that day probably ultimately was the reason the result went the way it did. Do you think did you have a better day with the bat for Bath?
Yeah, as I said, I've done a bit of research for this because I knew it was coming up. So I've looked at a few scorecards. The only other time I can think,
before you carry on,
go on.
People that are listening, when he when he leans back and he says, "Oh, I've done a bit of research." Look, you've got a beer in front of you, haven't you, Brownie?
I have.
And how many sips have you had of that beer, James?
Well, I finished it now, so I've had 25.
25. 25. So, anytime I've ever been lucky enough to share a beer with James Brown, he has always had 25 sips. Can you just talk the listeners through how those 25 go down?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a freak with my numbers. So I have to drink a pint in 5, then 2 more to make 7, then 3 more to make 10, then 12, 14, 15, 17, 19, 20, 23, 25.
So if anyone else is listening to this and is thinking, well, actually, maybe he doesn't remember. Maybe he does have to look back through the stats. Don't be fooled.
No, I do have. I haven't looked at the scorecards for a while, so it was quite nice to look back through it. I used to do it a lot when I was playing. No, probably the only other 2 times. Strangely, I wasn't playing much, but one of my favourite times. It was probably only about 3 or 4 years ago. It was when more than that. George Hankins was in the side. We went to Warrington in Cornwall.
That would have been 2013 because I was captain that year, but I was on Bakes' stag do.
JC captained the side, and I think I only got picked because I was the only old enough to drive the minibus. So there was me and Dave Black were in the front seat, and the back seat was basically full of 16-year-olds. And Max O'Leary got 40 odd, and I thought, what a brilliant player he was. And then I batted with George at the end. And yeah, I got 40 odd that game, and he got 40 odd that game. And that's one of the best I've ever batted. It just, everything clicked. And the other one was when Thorby was captain, we played Gloucester Seconds in a warm-up game.
Yes.
And we beat them, and I got 60 odd not out in that game. And that's probably the only other 2 that came close.
I was so glad you brought this up, James. So glad you brought up that game because I've got the scorecard loaded up in front of me.
Have you?
Do you know what else happened in that game, my friend?
Well, I didn't until a couple of years ago. I was looking at scorecards because I was trying to persuade my son I had got some good players out. And I was saying I've got Josh Butler out, and I got Trescothick out, and Matthew Maynard, and people like Keyswetter. And then I found that it must have been his only ever game for Gloucestershire, but the first wicket on the scorecard, one thing that I think me and you must have in common is we've both got Alex Hales out. Is that right?
Mate, listen, in 2014, he was the best player in the world. And I know one other bloke who's got him out. So,
Genuinely, I did not know he played in that game.
Well, look, I've got sort of 1.5 podcasts through this season. And that's the first opportunity I've had to bring it up. So,
yeah, I thought you might.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so obviously that game was part of a great run. The last time the club got to the final, and hopefully in episode 3 we'll get into some of the other games in that run. But if we fast forward a bit, we've had plenty of battles with Bridgie over the years. Obviously 2005, which we definitely don't want to get into too much detail.
No, but
the game, nor the bus journey home.
And you will remember it, and so will Tom Hanks, for about the next decade, as they had the pictures above the bar for the next 10 years of you and him getting out.
It was there in 2016 when I went back with Froome.
Was it?
But in 2019 or 2018, it was either last year or the year before. Again, we went back with Froome, and it was in the cupboard in the away dressing room. I don't know what's happened to that picture, but I think there's a strong chance that someone in the Froome dressing room has got their hands on that picture. But yeah, obviously that game for them, we definitely don't want to go into too many details. Barnsley, if you're listening, and Glash, if you're listening, I blame both of you. Barnsley for bowling a half volley, and Glash for moving long off, who will remain nameless, but up to mid-off for the last ball.
Gwills blames me because I bowled a no ball, and he said, how can you bowl a no ball running off 8 yards?
You've ever bowled in your life?
No, I know.
Bowling a no ball. Must have been a home umpire. But so we've sort of developing a bit of a history with Bridgie, and we come to summer of 2010.
Yeah.
And another national knockout game, but this time we're in the national stage. So over the years, the way that the national worked, the locations of the teams changed and flip-flop back and forth. And sometimes when we came up against Bridgie, we'd play them in the third round, and sometimes it would be in the last 16. It just depends on how they geographically mapped out the locations. But in this year, we played them in the last 16 of the competition. So we're kind of, very much in the, crucial stages of the tournament. And again, it's another year where you think you've got a chance. Every time you get past the regional stage, you think you've got a chance. And we had a great side that year. So Bridgwater at home, I remember it being a beautiful day. We have, if I read out the names on the team sheets, probably arguably the strongest collective group that I might have played with. You got JC, myself, Staunce, Alex Barrow at 4, Ross Jenkins, Lloydie at 6, Statey 7, AK 8, yourself at 9, Joe Dorgan at 10, and then March 11. What do you remember about sort of the team under Statey at that time?
This was a bit difficult for me because this was probably the first year I didn't play that much because and I desperately wanted to play under Statey, so that was a shame. But I just started my job at Kingswood, so that was my first summer at Kingswood. So I barely played on Saturdays, certainly in that first half of term. So that was the first year where I was having to not play much and probably played more on a Sunday than a Saturday. So it was always a bit of a strange feeling because you didn't really probably feel quite the same part of the side that I had done for the previous 6 or 7 years, where you'd play Saturday, Sunday every week. And so it was a bit of a change and a bit of a strange one. So I probably, this was July. I probably haven't played that much cricket up until this point. I probably played some knockout games and maybe the odd league game, but probably not a great deal at this point.
But again, given the other names on that team sheet and the limited availability that you had, it kind of says a lot about the standing that you had, amongst any of those captains at the time. I was exactly the same. I know Lloydie was. When you were available, you played. And you being the sort of guy that you are, probably, at times would have been quite embarrassed about that because you're a very sort of modest guy, but you were always on the sheet, especially in a national game if you were available.
It was really difficult, and it has been ever since, really, because the problem was two things: is that I always felt, like you say, quite embarrassed and quite uncomfortable about the fact that I couldn't play every week, but then I would often get picked for some of these games, countered by the fact that I desperately wanted to play and still loved playing and still do love playing. So it was a really difficult one in that, you sort of think, what are people thinking in me getting picked, but also thinking I love it. And actually for certainly, and particularly in Lloyd's era, I really wanted to support Lloyd because he'd been a good mate to me, and the same with Statey and the same with you. And part of it felt like if they wanted me to play, I wanted to play for them. But I still always felt a little bit uncomfortable as well. So it's been difficult since I started that job because it hasn't ever quite been the same since.
Well, in this game, I remember it being quite a spicy affair, if you like, because I remember them turning up with a lot of supporters.
Oh yeah, they did, didn't they? I'd forgotten that. Yeah,
they had a lot of supporters. They came along with a bus, and they were very vocal. And as the game began, they sort of were fairly quiet because we got off to a good start. We probably had them in jail at 106 for 8. And then they sort of managed to sort of scratch a few around at the end and got up to about 140 odd. But again, it seemed like in the national 175 in the big games, 175 always seemed to be about par, didn't it?
Yeah, and 150 here, which is pretty much what we had to get, we're still going to be tricky. Because as they're quite tense. There's a big crowd that does funny things to people. So yeah, 150 was by no means a given. And the other thing, I suppose, in that it is a really good side that we had, but it was probably pretty young, wasn't it?
Yes, probably. But then I think sometimes the danger with having a team like this, where you've got, Statey here is. This must have been one of the very few games where Statey didn't open himself and he was captain. But Statey's batting at 7.
Yeah.
Got a guy who's got a couple of league hundreds, batting 7. I think the danger always is that you sometimes feel like, well, I can leave it to the next guy. I can leave it.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you find yourself in trouble. I remember this game for a few reasons. It sort of stands out in my mind because the day before we played Bridgie in the league at their place, and I remember that Chris Skidmore, second ball, JC always took first ball because I don't like odd numbers, so I always had to be 2 or 4, and so JC always had the first. In the league game the day before, he got a single off the first ball, and then the second ball of the innings, I'd left one off Chris Skidmore, and he always bowled these big induckers, and it hit me on the kneecap behind my back pad, and I remember it just I got given out, and I had to sort of limp. I couldn't walk on the Sunday morning. I remember just having a run around, loosen up, just to sort of see if it was all right, and it's sort of okay. And so in the second innings, I think Statey sort of put me kind of out of the way somewhere for the majority of the game. And so second innings, I walked out to bat, and JC got a single off the first ball, and then so I'm facing Chris Skidmore again, and he hits me on the front pad this time, first ball again, and the finger goes up. And this is right around the time I'm getting released by Somerset. And as I'm walking off the pitch, all of the Bridgwater supporters are right by where the exit gate is, and they all start singing "Where's your contract gone?" as I'm going up the steps. In just complete despair. So I'll always remember this game, but fortunately, thankfully, we'll get to. I remember it more for the ending than I do for the start of it. So if we sort of kind of fast forward a little bit, JC sort of gets his standard 30 and out, probably put him mid off or something. Staunce bowled Colsey, unless Colsey's bowled it and then run to mid off and caught it. Not sure how that's happened, but
no.
Staunce has gone. Baz, Jenks, and we're in a bit of trouble suddenly from 75 for 3, which is comfortable, chasing 150 to 90 for 7 when you come up. I was never an optimistic watcher, as you know,
No.
and quite often in the tight run chases I wouldn't watch. I'd be somewhere else, walking around taking in the sights. But I've got to admit, this was one of those occasions where I didn't back us at night. I just thought everything was against us. They had a good side. I mean, if you look at the bowlers there, Ian Higgins, good bowler, Skidmore, Callum Haggett, another county bowler. Colsey's in there as well. They had Darryl Cox, remember him? He used to bowl those medium paces with the keeper up. They had good attack. And at 97, there's a long way to go, isn't there?
Yeah, well, this looks a much stronger side than the 2003 side, batting and bowling. I thought this were a good side. And did they win the league around this sort of time?
They won the league in 2012, which would have been 2 years after, but they had much of the same side, I think.
Yeah, so no, you're right. It was a good side. Probably not in our favour was the fact that, as I said, I wasn't playing much these days, so it was sort of less of a familiar thing for me to have to go in and try and do this sort of thing. But yeah, again, this one seemed more frenetic, whereas the one in 2003, I don't know whether it all felt a bit calmer. But there were run outs, and there was a near run out with Dorgers, and he he was a bit of a nightmare to bat with in these situations because he would just set off and you just have to send him back. And so I think either he nearly got run out or I nearly got run out, or maybe we both nearly got run out in the same ball, I think, and then he did get run out. Yeah, so it was a tough one, this one. And what's funny, looking at the scorecard, the only negative about occasionally being able to do this sort of thing and win some games or have a good innings here is I never got to see Simon Marchant in the change room waiting to go in, which everyone always told me was just the best thing to witness when he was waiting to bat in a tense situation at number 11. I never got to see it.
I'm not sure with Marchie whether it's got anything to do with the I mean, he obviously doesn't like the quick bowlers, does he? If there's someone quick bowling who's in the changing room, he is, he's berating every batter. It's getting closer. I don't remember what he was like but did he face a ball?
I don't know, actually, because it's difficult to work out. Because I say 90 for 7, we must have got another 50 or 60 at that stage, and the only people I can see is AK got 13 and Dorgers got 7.
I think and we'll sort of get to the conclusion, in a minute. But I remember with Marchie, I think what happened was when Dorgers got run out, he was on strike for 1 ball because. Right. Well,
that's right. That's probably right.
I've got a bit of a memory of that last over that I'll sort of share with you and get your take. But 90 for 7. Again, it's probably a similar situation to the Bridgie game in 2003. But of course, I think the reason why you would say it was felt more frenetic is because when you are chasing, it just seems like the batting side are always the side that are under pressure more than the fielders, doesn't it?
Well, exactly. You sort of that in that situation, one mistake and you lost. Whereas if you're batting first, one mistake, okay, and you only get 130, but you still got a chance to defend 130. So, yeah, it definitely felt more frenetic. But and again, I suppose I was a little bit closer to the end in that I was batting 9 in this game. I was batting 8 in the game before. When I went in that game, although he got out fairly quickly, I was batting with a recognised batter, whereas I only batted with the tail here, I suppose. But yeah, I remember this one feeling much more tense and stressful, and it's probably a combination of both of those things.
So we get to 127 for 7 when Kegsy goes. I guess that's, from 90 for 7, the fielding team are very much the favourites for the game. When you get it to sort of 20 needed with 3 wickets left, it's probably just about flip the other way. And then 127 for 8, Kegsy goes, and I guess you and Dorgers kind of creep up. Do you remember how his run out happened?
I can't. I think I hit one to mid on, and he probably did. He set off. And then I sent him back or something. I can't really. I've got visions of it because, as I say, I remember horrible helmets, and his purple helmet was doing something ridiculous with that curly hair popping out underneath it. But I just felt like in that innings, I remember him doing some pretty random things between the wickets, and that was probably the final one. But no, I can't really remember much about it.
It's just the panic, isn't it? That kind of sets in. So 145 for 8, we need 2 to win the game. And you with I think with 2 wickets in hand, your only concern there should be just take as much time as you need, or with the time you got left, which probably would have been 8 balls at that stage, just to get the 1. Get yourself level so you can't lose the game. I don't know what the tiebreaker would have been. Because Bridgwater were all out. I guess it would have been on fewer wickets, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
But so Joe Dorgan gets run out, and then Marchie comes in. And I'm sure that Marchie has to face one ball.
Well, that would make sense because I faced the last. Oh, did I? No, I'm not sure actually. I reckon I've got a feeling Dorgan's got run out of the non-strikers end. And did I get one off the last over? I'm not sure.
No, I think so. I'm pretty sure what happens is that Dorgans gets run out, and then Marchie survives one ball.
Right.
And then we go to the last over, and there's countless examples. If you look at famous games of cricket, I guess the '99 World Cup semi-final is sort of the obvious one that stands out. But if you've got 6 balls to get 2 runs, it doesn't matter if you don't get anything off the first 5. You having the composure and the cricket nous, if you like, to be able to wait for the right ball is something that I don't think you can learn that. I don't think you can teach that. And I remember you playing out the first 3 balls, very, very firmly saying no to Marchie, knowing that we still need 2 and knowing that you're the one who's going to have to do it. I mean, do you remember any of that? And if not, what do you remember about the 4th ball of that over, or the last game?
It was 2 we needed, was it? I thought it was only 1 we needed. That's probably why I was calm. Yeah. What? No. Well, what? Probably in hindsight, what I might have done is get the 1 then and tie the game. But like you say, no one really knew the rules. I was quite good at speaking to the umpire, so I probably did know the rules, and I'd probably worked out that 1 might not be enough for us. So yeah, the good thing was, I'm looking at Callum Haggett only bowled 2 overs, so I'm guessing he pulled up injured. And by the fact that we got it to the last over, they'd gone. Merv Halloran was bowling, who was a very part-time bowler for them. Yeah. So Steve Davis had only bowled 4 overs, who would have been the obvious other guy to bowl it, but I guess they probably wouldn't have want to bowl a spinner at that stage. So it was a part-time bowler bowling, and part of me thought, because they had all the field up, obviously, they had no one out as far as I can remember, maybe 3rd man or something for the edge. But I think it was a tight ring, and they were just going to try and really put the pressure on. And I just sort of thought, and I'd faced a couple of overs of him. He bowled quite full, and I just thought he'd bowled me 1 in 6 that I could probably get away. And luckily, he bowled me. I remember it quite clearly because he bowled me quite a wide half volley, and B, it's probably the only time I've ever hit it over mid off. Because if I ever go aerial, you would know that my horrible bottom hand would have taken it somewhere over wide long on, and somehow it looked like a proper shot and went over mid off, 1 bounce 4 to win it. So that was a nice feeling. And I think walking off, I would have had Owen by then. And I think that's the day maybe where JC's mum gave me a picture afterwards of Owen had run onto the pitch as a 3-year-old, I guess, and I'd carried him off. So that was pretty nice. I've still got that picture somewhere.
I remember that. That really slipped out for me. You smashing that boundary. And I spoke to Kegsy. You didn't play in the Sully game the year before, but I spoke to Kegsy, about him being out on the pitch and us being on the balcony. When he hits the 4 to win the game with 2 balls left, that feeling that you get when you're on the balcony screaming and shouting, it's just, it always stays with you forever. But if you're out on the pitch, I mean, do you get a sense of how crazy everyone's going up on the balcony?
Yeah, I think so. But it's funny because out there you just go. You've only got your partner, so you always run to them. So I must have run and hugged Marchie, I guess.
And he would have been just indifferent about
that. Yeah. He was. Yeah. So yeah, it's a pretty good feeling. But like I say, I never really got overexcited. There is that picture of where me and Lloyd got a partnership to win the Ealing game, and there's a very famous picture of him running off with his arms up.
Well, you've been very lucky to have well, not lucky. I mean, I suppose very skillful to hit the winning runs in a lot of close national knockout games. And yet, you know, that picture of Lloyd.
See, I don't mind that picture because it's a great picture of him and it's a great picture of the moment. Yeah. Apart from the fact that I'd run to hug him and he ran straight past me. And he got photoed about 2 yards after passing me. Come here. So, good times.
I think, you know, that game, everything, the fact that it was Bridgie and the fact that we'd got ourselves into this massive hole, you know, I think when you do hit the winning runs, you know, it's relief more than anything else. There's two things that stick out about just the moments after that game, and I will never forget watching you walking off the pitch holding Owen. It's one of those real standout, special moments that I think you only get those in big national cup games. If you're a club,
yeah, no, that was pretty special. And as I said, I don't think I've got as good a picture as I might have from it because something went wrong and I wasn't very good at getting to JC's mum and asking her for the proper copy. But it's still nice. I've still got it somewhere. And it's alongside, at the time, Shrub was doing a blog. Do you remember he started doing the Bath Cricket Club blogs? And he'd written a piece, and I'm sad enough to have printed this off because he wrote something about the best 32 not out he'd ever seen. Yeah, so I've got those two side by side somewhere.
I think the other thing about that as well was, do you remember, because we'd been getting stick all day off those Bridgwater supporters.
Yeah.
Going out on the balcony afterwards and waving them off.
Yeah.
No. Oh, that was good.
Because one of them would have been Paul Windsor, I think. Who obviously, for those who don't know, scored the winning 4 in the 2005 game.
You don't need to talk about this, mate. It's history. Nev, he's, you know, like last year and the year before, playing for Froome now. We were in Whipple, Somerset, which is, I guess, League 3. Got promoted last year, but for the last 2 years, we played Bridgie too. So you go down there and see the same old faces, and you know, Nev is always down there, and it's always the first thing he ever mentions. But that's the whole point, isn't it? Of this podcast, is the magic of that competition, and there've been so many games, and I think, you know, I said the same thing to Kegsy. I think if you are a Bath player and you played for Bath for a long period, everyone's got their own individual memory that sticks out of the national. You've got more than one. You've got quite a few, which is lovely to have. I think they stick out more than any other. I mean, do you have of all the games? I mean, obviously, I guess 03 probably sticks out, you know, for obvious reasons. But are there any other games that you sort of immediately think of when someone talks about national knockout cricket?
Loads. You know, because I say it's been quite nice. I panicked a bit and thought I better try and remember some facts. So I spent longer than I should have done last night looking through scorecards. The game before this one in 2010 was where Smythe kept hitting it into the sea at Sully.
No spoilers. That's coming up later on in the season.
Sorry. And Griff hooking Alex Wharf. Benton's probably the best game I ever played in was I can't even remember. Was it Roffey?
Yeah, that's going to be episode 4 in this series.
No, that was one of the best games because that was a proper ding dong, 2 good sides, and again we were up against it, and he played a brilliant knock. So that was brilliant. The one where I guess did I hit the winning runs when you got the 100?
I always when I think back to those, obviously that game sticks out. But
what game is that? Who were they?
Sunbury. Yeah.
Sunbury.
But when I think about that game, none of the stuff that happened before sticks out. The thing that I can remember in my mind's eye is you being on strike. And again, anyone who doesn't know, we were 8 down. We had about 10 balls left. We needed 4 or so. I think we needed exactly 4 actually. And just remember you just cutting one, just getting one behind point and it hitting the wall or the fence just in front of the pavilion. And, for me, when I think back to that memory, the fact that you're at the other end, I think kind of sums up, where you are in the history of Bath Cricket Club. Because how many other guys can say that their memory of the national involves you? I'd say it was probably quite a lot of people, because Benton Benton's going to be in this series talking about that Roffey game. Griff's coming on to talk about Ealing, Smythe to talk about Sully. And you were there and present in all those games. And as long as you are willing, are you still going to be trying to sort of turn out and play some cricket when you can?
Yeah, I would be. Yeah, and definitely now I'm hoping that Owen is my route back into it. Because my aim was always to try and play for long enough until he could play. But I've had to take a little bit of a break with that. But yeah, I always say that I remember Stuart Prescott saying, he had enough training. The one thing, I've always loved training, and I still love training, which sort of means I still love playing. So I would still play for as long as I can, and I would play more than I do if I possibly could. But job and family and stuff stops me. But no, I still love playing, and I would still want to. But going back to the memories, if that Sunbury game was the same year as the Roffey game,
yeah, it was.
That was probably my favourite cup year, because they were all belting games. They were some really good games.
Yeah.
And did we lose in the semi to
Blackheath?
Blackheath. But that was a really good cup run, because we there were some really good games in that. What year was that?
That was 2015.
2015.
The other game in that season that stands out was when Zach Miller got 50 down at Foster, when we were about 90 for 8 or something, and he got us up to about 170 with a really good knock. But yeah, I mean, that Roffey game, Benton will probably give us some good insights on the bus journey back. But talk about different cup games. When you go away to a team that you don't know and you're a bit further away, you often get memorable bus journeys back. Any national knockout bus journeys stick out for you, James? Or?
I don't remember many of them if we won. Actually, again, that one from Roffey was quite entertaining. I think Magsy drove home, and it was a little bit awkward because some of the kids I teach were probably in the team that day. But yeah, that was still quite good fun. So yeah, there's been a few, and Warrington actually, that I was driving luckily. But George Hankins, I think, came of age that day. He was quite lively on the bus on that day back. But I'll leave it there.
It's a long old walk from North Parade back to Salford.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, one of the other ones I remember is getting back on the bus and Steve Griffiths is in the car park, moonwalking, going, "Ow, James Brown!" as my wife has been waiting an hour and a half to pick me up, and I wasn't best pleased.
Well done, Lucy. She's suffered long, hasn't she? But,
she has. Bless her.
But listen, Brownie, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And it's kind of it's a rough time for everybody. So to be able to do things like this, I think, will bring back a lot of very happy memories for a lot of people. And for me, being able to kind of reminisce with some of the different people I played with has been really, really nice too. So
thank you. That's a great idea. And yeah, it's been really good fun chatting again.
All right, mate. Well, listen, thanks a lot. The next episode in this series will be a look back at the 2003 Cup run, which, spoilers, ends with Statey on his knees. Which will be good to get his thoughts on that. So thank you, everyone, for listening, and we look forward to hearing some more National Knockout stories on our next episode.